Hello, and welcome to Chaotic Creative, the show about embracing the chaos that comes from living a creative life.
We're your hosts, two self-proclaimed chaotic creatives. I'm Rachael Renee. I am an encourager of folks to prioritize play, to live a more fulfilling and creative life full of confidence.
Great. And I am Lauren Hom, better known as Hom Sweet Hom everywhere on the internet. I am a designer, lettering artist, muralist, and most recently, chef.
I'm really just spiraling in my brain thinking about how I said confidence, and I was like, confidence?
You're good.
Question mark?
You're good. It was great.
Perfect. It's a good segue into the topic that we're going to talk about today, which is kind of self-perception, labels, kind of the boxes we put ourselves in.
Yeah, we're entering the new year. This is the time of year where even if you don't subscribe to, resolutions, new year, new me, like all that bullshit, you still tend to be a little more reflective and think about, okay, this is the time where we're setting ourselves up for how we're going to proceed for the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. This is the time to challenge maybe pre-existing like systems you had built for yourself. This is like your framework time where it's like, okay, you mentioned like, I'm going to read this many books, or like, I would like to do this year, or this is the direction I'd like to go in. And a conversation that we had recently inspired this episode because I recently started going to the museum as a self-proclaimed, for let's say the last decade, not a museum person. Mm-hmm. I'm a bad artist. I don't go to the museum. I would say that it was boring. It's overwhelming. I used to just speed run museums. I'd pay my $30, speed run the museum, and then just feel like drained and or like I didn't get it.
Yeah.
Like too quiet, just all this stuff that didn't do much for me. And I have turned a new leaf. I live not too far away from a museum here in Detroit. I'm like trying not to give away my address by saying this, but it's fine. Whatever.
Also, like there are a lot of things that are close to that museum.
Okay, yeah. So I am located within walking distance of the Detroit Institute of Arts, which a lot of people are.
Yeah. And what's cool about the DIA is that everyone in the 3 counties gets free access to that museum.
Incredible. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so because of that access, which is something that we as taxpayers vote on as a millage, where we fund the arts, and we voted for the last couple elections to fund it. It's just a little tax levied. Because we get free access, I realized I could go and just look at one exhibit for like an hour and then leave. Mm-hmm. It's inconsequential. I didn't have to we've talked about this in previous episodes. With my maximizer, Jeff Bezos brain, I'm like, okay, paid my $30, especially coming from New York. Museums are so expensive.
Totally.
I would try to squeeze as much juice out of that experience as possible, almost like overeating at a buffet. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, I feel bad.
Why did I do this to myself? Yeah.
When in reality, like 1 or 2 exhibits is enough. And you have to just kind of cap it at that and be like, that was good.
I think, us talking about this the other day, it reminded me of the parallel with sort of telling myself that I don't have time. And I think this is something that a lot of creative people do. We have an interest and we say, oh, I don't have time to learn that new skill, or I don't have time to paint every day. And I think it's something that I was doing. I mentioned this, I think, in a previous episode where I hadn't been to the ceramic studio in a couple months. And I sort of built up this story in my head that I needed a full day of no plans to go to the studio and get stuff done. And I never have a full day with no other things I need to do. And I also probably don't want to spend 12 hours at the ceramic studio. Like my hands would hurt. I would
so dry.
I would lose steam. I would lose inspiration. And so it's partially that, I think, of the, I don't want to devote my whole day to this because I'm not a museum person. And this is not how I want to be spending all of my time. But then recognizing like, okay, I can just go and take what resonates and then ditch the rest. Like I don't have to walk the whole museum just because I got my ticket to get in here. Like I think that's one really beautiful thing about having the free access is like you could go look at one painting and then leave. Or there's a cafe in there. You could go get a cup of coffee and just like see a cool statue, walk up the marble stairs, and then leave.
Yeah, like baby stepping your way into a new identity, into a new like habit, I think is really powerful. The way that I baby stepped my way into the museum too is Kristle texted me and was like, "Hey, I'm taking my niece to the DIA. Do you want to join us because you're nearby?" And with an invitation from someone else, I might not have gone on my own. And when she invited me, I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" Since the theme, I think of this, one of the themes of this season is personal growth, exploration, trying new things. Like I'm in a season of change. We started the season, right, with talking about seasons of change. And I was like, yeah, I'm currently at a place where I'm open to that. I'm no longer like, the roots are not as like strong in my identity of like, fuck museums. And I don't know why I felt that way. It's just, I became the same way that a lot of creatives and designers are like, I don't do sports, like sports ball, haha. Like, and listen, I fall firmly in that camp, which I know you don't. I know that there are certain things where if you ask me to go karaoke with you, I'd still say no, because it's still like a visceral, like, like I feel my body like tensing up. But when Kristle invited me to the museum, I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah. I'm open.
I love that curiosity too, because I think that that's so critical to personal growth. And I do talk about labels and identities in the Prioritize Play workshop. It's one of the first exercises I make people do. Like, tell me what your titles are. You say them at the beginning of the episode. You say, I'm a muralist, I'm a chef, I'm an artist, a letterer. Like, those are the titles that you most resonate with. But you added chef in the last year. Like, you were not stuck in those. You're willing. We all have a lot of titles. But the first handful that we say, or that my participants say, the folks who do the workshop, that's how we see ourselves. Like, do we introduce ourselves with our job title? Do you introduce yourself as I'm a mom? Those are the things, and rightfully so, they can be the most important labels in your life. But are you also giving yourself sort of like the closed off labels of like, I'm not a museum person, I'm not a sports person? And why? Why are you not those things? And maybe you thought that 10 years ago. Maybe there's a way for you to learn something about yourself, or like realize you're missing a whole opportunity of inspiration. Like, you told me about so many things you learned about that one exhibit.
Oh my gosh, I know. It's like you are depriving yourself of all these really rich experiences for no good reason. Like what you were saying, like, why am I this way? Why have I like taken this label and like, this is the hill I'm going to die on? Yeah. Like, I'm not this kind of person, like just because.
And it's okay if you like try again and still recognize that it's a no. Like the karaoke example is great. I also feel pretty anti-karaoke.
My nightmare activity.
I will absolutely go hype you up from the crowd, but I will not sing. I would have to be so like comfy, and maybe in a karaoke room with my friends, like one of the rental ones. Not even that. Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, so karaoke is a for sure no for you. And I think like I have stuff like that. Like you guys went to a jazz thing last night, and we tried to go to a jazz thing previously, and I went, and then I got there and I was like, I want to go home. And I did. And you both respected me, and I really appreciate that. Like, I feel that level of comfort in our friendship that I could be like, actually, it changed my mind. And you still invited me, and I appreciated it. And I was like, no, I would like to be in bed at 9 p.m. So, yeah, you're allowed to have those views of like, nope, that's not for me. But if you have some that have been long-standing, like, I don't cook, I'm not a museum person, I think it's beneficial to us to challenge those every once in a while to see like, does this still apply? If yes, that's okay. If not, maybe there's an opportunity for growth, or for like a new experience, or, learning something about myself.
Yeah. And I think there's also so much space in between a hard yes and a hard no. Like going from not a museum person to like being a museum person doesn't mean I have to go every day or even every week, or like become like a donor to the museum right away, or like make it my entire personality. It might just be that I go a little more often, or I now understand there's a portal here available to me to like experience like the richness of an exhibit that I want to see or whatnot. Or like for you with cooking that we've talked about, you don't love cooking, but like there are some recipes that you're like, oh yeah, this works for me. Or like I can meal prep on this day, or I like this style of cooking. There are ways to explore like different facets of a craft or an activity where you might have just been completely closed off to it before that could actually lead to some really valuable creative insights or even just some like quiet time.
Yeah. And I think when we tell ourselves these stories and we continue to like self-validate in that way, like I don't like cooking. I say it all the time. I joke about it. But the more I talk about not liking it, the less open I will become to liking it.
Oh, like it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Totally. And I think that that's true with a lot of things. Like I'm not an artist. I'm not creative. So then you tell yourself that so much that you don't even try. And you don't think like someone said you weren't creative when you were like in elementary school and you did a painting that someone said was bad. And then we never challenge it because some authority figure taught us that when we were kids. So we never thought to challenge it. So it's like the more that we say it, the more we believe it and the more we are unwilling to challenge it. So I've actually started in my head. I mean, I still say it and I'm working on actively changing language because I think how we talk to ourselves and what we speak out loud is actually really impactful to us. I think instead of saying, I don't like cooking, I'm starting to say like, I'm trying to find ways to enjoy cooking more because I'm never going to love it. I'm never going to be like you where you're excited to experiment and make things, but I can find a new recipe that I maybe am excited to eat. And that's more exciting than spending $50 on takeout that's going to be cold by the time it gets to my door, you know? So I think understanding the labels is the first step and then practicing challenging them.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that came to mind when you said that was thrifting because we recently went thrifting together and you and I both love that shit.
Man, our cart was full. We shared a cart, which is good, a good strategy, but wow, can we fill up a cart fast?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But it reminds me of, I think a lot of people love the idea of thrifting. Not everyone likes thrifting. Like it's an overwhelming environment. You kind of have to have a plan. Like you and I go thrifting and we walk into the store and we separate.
Yeah.
We go to our stations and then we meet up like 30 minutes later once we've done our like pass. And then we might do a little bit of like socializing shopping.
Yeah.
But like we'll meet in the homeware section.
It's really funny because I was actually thinking about that, how like we walked in and then I was like, all right, I'm going to go look at this. And you were like, okay, I'm going to go back to this section. And even though like we were hanging out, and I think that's why I used to be, I won't go thrifting with a lot of people because of that. Like I want us to just be able to go hunt on our own. And then, yeah, the common space is the
and
homeware.
Then drag our spoils together.
Yeah. And then review. We did a really good review process of, do we need this or is it just a novelty? And
yeah, you put back a cool but boring serving dish. I put back a microwavable egg poacher.
And the egg slicer.
And the egg slicer, you know me, I'm not a big fan of the single-use kitchen tool. They are so, like the novelty lover in me wants it so bad. But the finite amount of kitchen space that I have says, no, don't do it. And so those are the angel and devil on my shoulders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we also both said no to some orange ceramic, a set, good. But there was only 3 bowls.
Weird amount of dishes.
Yeah.
Yep. Which is probably why they ended up at the thrift store because someone broke one of each.
And I have a lot of weird amount of dishes, but I have 3 sets of bowls that I've made myself. And like those weren't going to replace those because mine are special.
Of course. Yeah. Obviously. Sorry to take us off track, but
I love it.
You are one of the only people like I really enjoy thrifting with because you get it. And you also have a car, so you get to drive me to the thrift store.
I'm honored to. And then I made you go get ice cream.
So good.
Right.
I know.
Lauren had her first Dole Whip yesterday.
I did.
Yeah. I'm a Dole Whip hater.
After you were talking trash about it.
I really was. I was trying not to skew your opinion, but I couldn't even explain how it tastes because I don't like them.
It tastes so good.
I think I had an expectation of it being pineapple flavored soft serve, like pineapple and on top of vanilla.
I see.
But it's not
like
that.
This is going to turn into a culinary podcast. I like that dense, icy, like pink berry froyo texture in soft serve versus the fluffy soft serve.
Yeah.
But I think that's just because growing up in Southern California, once Pinkberry hit in my hometown, game over. That's where all my hard-earned high school job money went. I worked at an ice cream store to go spend money at the competitor ice cream store.
Oh man, that's really funny. I had never tried. We're really going down a tangent.
Great.
But when are we not?
We're good. I got it.
Okay.
I got you.
When I first moved to Detroit like 10 years ago, it was the first time that I had ever had the froyo place where you weigh it.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I'm like, I can add whatever I want. I can try all these flavors.
For $40.
Yeah, it was so expensive. But we had so many of those. And now I don't even know where to find one of those where you can weigh them. They really kind of had a wave and I miss them. I love classic soft serve, but I sometimes want like a lemony froyo.
Yeah, I agree. I think we got to bring back the weigh it and pay it style of dining.
Yeah. Yeah.
To get us back on track,
yes.
I was going
You were
to say,
using the thrifting analogy, but
thrifting, cooking, like I think our invitation to all of you listening is, are there any ways of being labels that you've, clung on to for, let's say, for me, not being a museum person was decades. We'd go to the museum in art school and I'd just be like, I'm bored. And I just kind of adopted that label. And I think the like contrarian in me too was like, I'm a designer who doesn't like museums.
Yeah.
And like, sure, whatever. That's maybe like younger me trying to be like different.
Yeah.
But museums are cool. Like our invitation to you is, are there any of those labels that you're unnecessarily holding on to that maybe you could peel off? Like, gently peel off with some Goo Gone or some hot water. We
love a peel.
Are you depriving yourself of some rich experiences or new perspectives unnecessarily too? Especially now that like, you and I have been friends for 8 years now and we've grown up a lot too. And maybe there are some new things you want to try. And like you were saying, limiting beliefs, like maybe there are some things you are closed off to unnecessarily because you just are clinging to your identity marker. And I think that's one of the flip sides of labels. And we were talking about this before we recorded, but in the digital, like the internet age that we came online and started promoting our creative work in, unfortunately, like the setup of like the hashtag, SEO, like keywords, incentivized us to reduce ourselves to these, phrases and terms in order to communicate to people who had no idea who we were. And I understand that language is a way for us to communicate quickly and succinctly, and we were just doing our best to find those labels. But I think what plagues a lot of creative people online now, 10, 15 years later, is like over-identifying with the label and having to perform the label of like, I am lettering artist, I am calligrapher, like I am stationery store owner, because we now are part of these communities online and there are expectations and aesthetics and like ways of talking, and it can be very overwhelming. So if any of that isn't serving you anymore, rip the fucking label off.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've talked in previous episodes and maybe even last season about how the advice used to be to niche down, get really specific. And that is valuable to create a container and like hone in on your skills. But also, we are all multifaceted creatures and we have so many interests and little bizarre ways of approaching our lives that it's authentic to show other sides of yourself, right? Like it's authentic to have multiple labels. None of us are just one thing.
Exactly. And honestly, from my own experience, most of the turmoil of like performing the label, can I take it off? Like, what will people think? Is in my own head.
Yes.
No one is like, how dare you post anything but lettering when I started to slowly expand like 5 years ago. It was me being mean to myself in my head, being like, you post anything but inspirational hand-lettered quotes, people will revolt. They will.
I mean, I think another good example in terms of that actually happening is when people like us who are friendly and bubbly and enthusiastic on the internet talk about politics.
Mm-hmm.
And then people are like, stay in your lane. I came for the lettering. Like no one has ever said that to me. And if people are mean, I block them on the internet,
Amazing.
you know?
Yeah.
But
Don't be an asshole.
Yeah. Yeah. Our internet presence, our online portfolio, all of those things are our spaces, and they can represent the various facets of ourselves. So yeah.
Yeah, you can mostly post about 1 or 2 topics, and like, yeah, it's human to deviate once in a while, and like, you can just get back to it. You do whatever you want. It's your page.
Mm-hmm. And you can also do that without, getting away from the internet analogy. You can do that in your personal life. Like you can explore and step into, do I want to be a museum person? And then realize like, nope, lettering is where it's at for me, or cooking is where it's at, or I really like being a dog mom and I want to focus all my attention on my dog. And that's great. You don't have to, just because you step outside of the labels that you've stuck to in the past doesn't mean you can't go back to them.
100%. Wow, that just jogged something in my memory of one thing I wrote in my journal when I was thinking about leaving my full-time job 11 years ago.
Wow.
My advertising agency job, my very first job out of college, I had journaled. I was 23 at the time. I was like, okay, if I go freelance and I leave this job and it doesn't work out, I can always go back and get another entry-level advertising job. Like the difference between getting a junior art director position at 24 versus 23 seems kind of negligible.
Mm-hmm.
So I may
especially
as well
now that we're in our 30s. I'm sure it felt big.
Yeah, and like that's a really good point of like you can always go back.
Yeah.
Like if I wanted to go full culinary with my content online and then go back to full lettering, that's fine. People can come and go as they please. I think that's one thing I've been reminding myself of is just like someone unfollowing you isn't like a condemnation of who you are. Mm-hmm. We all have agency to like curate our feeds. We talk about training our algorithms, right? Because we're all very sensitive and like everyone wants to curate their own tiny screen experience. That's completely valid. If someone isn't interested in what I'm posting anymore, I want them to leave because then they're just going to be an asshole to me down the line.
Yeah.
But they can always come back. Mm-hmm. It's free to unfollow and it's free to resubscribe.
I have absolutely done that where like, something that someone was talking about, maybe it was just something with their personal life was just reminding me of something that I didn't want to think about in my own life. Had nothing to do with them. And then I circled back, grew, whatever it was. I can't think of any particular examples, but I know that I've done that. Like, oh, I used to follow this person and then I didn't, but now I'm ready to again.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, we can change our mind about anything.
Yeah.
Live in the gray area.
Mm-hmm.
One thing related to museums that I wanted to bring up, because our last episode was the play questions. Sorry,
no.
Silly questions. No,
the last episode was about goals.
Okay.
For the
yes, you're right.
Reflections.
Okay.
From goals from 2024.
So a couple episodes when we were talking about our silly questions. One thing that I am recognizing as we're having this conversation is when I go to a museum, I often feel like I don't understand the art because I have no formal art training and I don't know what to look for and what to examine or analyze. And then I've had to reckon with that and realize like, oh, I can also just like this one because it's pretty and it feels nice to look at. That's all it needs to be for me. And once I started kind of giving myself the permission to be like, I like it or I don't like it, it made it a lot less stressful because I know I've shared with you in casual conversations, like I still sometimes don't feel valid as an artist. Like I don't feel like I belong in the creative community, even though I am absolutely a part of it in my own way. But sometimes in spaces that are more formal, like networking events or a museum, places where like in my head, everyone else is a professional and I'm a novice and they know that. That's when I decide to lean into that. I'm not a museum person. I'm not a networking person. And I found myself doing that last week.
Ooh, like that's a protective.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, oh, well, I just don't like networking. So that's why I didn't have a bad time. I had a great time, but I felt uncomfortable in that situation.
Rachel's referring to like a creative networking event we went to.
Yes. Sorry. We didn't
a
say
more
that.
formal creative networking event. Like, and I know we've talked about networking before in season 1 about like, it's like making friends. This was very much more like a rubbing shoulders kind of event.
Yeah, like it kind of felt like a who's who, like, what are you doing? And everyone that we talked to was lovely. Like there no one intentionally gave me that feeling, but I just went into it being like, do I belong here? And so I've been thinking about that a lot. And I think in museum spaces or formal art spaces or even like art events in the city, I still sometimes am like, do I deserve to be here? And then I see like 40 people that I know, and then we gab about whatever. And that's all it is. So I think leaning into those labels of like, I'm not a networking person is a protective mechanism.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I wanted to say is back to the silly questions. One playful activity that I like to do to kind of like get out of my own head when I'm at a museum is every room that I go into, whoever I'm with, because I have gone alone, and I still do this in my head. So like if you and I went to the museum, I'd be like, Lauren, I need you to pick out which part of the painting is me and which one is you and why. And so you have to like pick a character from the oil paintings. And it's just like a funny thing to like completely take you away from like the intention of the painting and the history and all of that. But that's okay. You're allowed to have fun. So I would say like, am I the parrot or am I the statue?
Getting to interpret the art through your own lens. It's like those art history memes. Have you seen those? They're hilarious.
Absolutely. So you're allowed to make an experience that could feel a little stuffy. Or I know you don't like that it's quiet in museums. I love it.
I just put my headphones in and it changed the entire experience for me. I went alone. And I think that's another thing is I had always gone with a group and I felt like it was rude. You can't put your headphones in with a group. I went alone. I went for an hour and a half. I put my headphones in, put on a playlist. And I had a great time.
I love that. Yeah. I like going to museums alone or doing the thing that we do at the thrift store where like I'll go with someone, but I just walk my own way and we find each other eventually.
Together apart.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it was good. I feel similar to how you feel about like, I think art comes with the assumption that like, oh, you need to understand the theory and the context and all this stuff. And I just like, I'm like, color's pretty good.
Yeah. And that's how I approach like cooking and eating. You know, I'm like, yum, yum, or I don't like it.
Yum, yum, yuck, yuck.
You know, like it's fun. I have so many people in my life who do like cooking and flavor profiles and stuff. And so like I'll go out to dinner with you or whoever. And then there's like the like tasting like, ooh, I think I taste a little bit of this. And like half my plate's already gone. And I'm like, this is really good.
This is really making me reflect on like the ways in which I turn away instead of towards something with curiosity versus like the protective turning away from something like with wine. As a food person, I can talk about like the complexities of food because I know it. I think having information gives us the language to be able to discuss it, even if like none of us are fucking right. Like taste is somewhat subjective.
Absolutely. Just like art.
Yeah. But with wine, my go-to, even though I'm a food person, is I will walk into a nice restaurant and a shitty restaurant, a dive bar, whatever it is, and I will say, give me your house red. Like whatever the cheapest red is on the menu, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Because it's the easiest way for me to place an order and get something that it's going to be fine. Because I, instead of getting curious about like, oh, this is drier, lighter, full-bodied, I don't actually know what those mean. I'm just like, I am a ding-dong about wine, so just give me the slop.
Yeah. Which is interesting because I feel like also the wine scene is often very pretentious, but I have had really lovely experiences with like pals who know their stuff who are like, it's okay, you don't need to know that. And then it's like, do you like to taste it like this? And
Yeah, because I think the reason I have that response to like, I don't know anything about wine, give me the house red, is because of my preconceived notion that wine is fancy and you have to have a refined palate. And instead of turning towards it, I just turn away.
Yeah.
And that's really given me something to noodle on. Maybe I should be more curious about it.
And I think it's like you are allowed to be mid-interested. That's something that I'm like so passionate about. It's like you're allowed to be like, I like a dry, chilled, little bit fizzy red. I don't know what that means. I don't know where those grapes came from, but I know that that's what I like. I like a chilled red, and I've then learned like certain types of wines that like I probably will like. And generally, good people are not going to gatekeep that information. They're not going to try to make you feel inferior. Maybe at a fancy wine place.
Yeah.
You know, I dress like this sometimes going into fancy places, and like that's someone else's problem if they're going to be condescending or gatekeepy toward you.
That is true. So much of like art, whether it is culinary arts, like wines, fashion, I think a lot of that is like markers for class as well. Like the knowledge about that stuff. If you are knowledgeable, it says something about like, are you in that in-group or
in the know?
not?
Yeah. Just thinking about the class conversation, we talked about art in class a little bit yesterday in the museum discussion, but I've been taking French classes. That's been a goal for me. And my teacher and I were talking about how, you know, French has a lot of rules, and so many of like the French language has a lot of rules, and so many of those rules were made up. Like the first dictionaries were made up so that people could distinguish from class, so that poor men and women and poor men were not able to communicate with the same grammar.
Wow. Yes. And that's what I learned at the museum. That's what I was going to say is on my way out of the exhibit, there was another exhibit that I just kind of browsed through about Greek and Roman pottery, where I saw that disgusting thing that we'll definitely link to in the show notes. But this isn't about the disgusting thing. It was talking about how the different Greek pottery with the orange and black motifs, this is a good ceramics throwback too, because the different necks on the vases were either for water or wine or mixing, because in high society in Greece, it was uncouth and uncultured to drink wine straight. You were supposed to mix it with water, which you would be called a heathen nowadays if you poured like water into your red wine.
Like people make fun of people who put an ice cube in their wine.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that is what you said about French, the language, and this thing about the ancient Greeks and water and wine is a perfect example of everything is made up.
Yeah.
And so go into it with curiosity. It's all made up anyways. Anyone who's an asshole to you about it, it's a good filter for who shouldn't be your friend.
Right. And I think with the language thing, we all, you know, learned grammar rules, and I think I would have made a great like editor, because I catch grammar errors like very easily when I'm reading something. When people use different or in quote unquote incorrect grammar, I used to correct, like when I was, you know, a teenager or something. And I've in the past, I don't know, decade, have started to learn that like as long as the point is coming across, especially as I'm trying to learn a second language for the first time, and as long as we can comprehend each other, like that's what matters. The grammar is literally made up to distinguish classes.
Yeah. When you learned more, you loosened your grip on the I'm a perfect grammar person.
Yes.
Like people love to say, I'm a grammar snob. But what does that really mean? And like why are you holding on to it so tightly?
Right. And like, are you providing any benefit by correcting someone, especially if English is not their first language?
Yeah.
Like all you're doing is making them feel bad when you still understood what they were trying to say.
Yeah, 100%.
And so that's what my French teacher has been saying. Like, if your goal is to be able to communicate, you can do that now. You might sound a little bit silly, but someone who's a nice person will understand and like help you get there.
It's like when people are arguing in Instagram comments and someone corrects someone's grammar as like a last ditch effort to like zing someone.
Yeah.
It's actually there.
Yeah. And it doesn't quite hit like
no, you look like an asshole.
Yeah. Because that person doesn't care.
I know.
Oh man.
This has
Anyway,
been a lovely, eye-opening conversation. I hope it has been for our listeners.
I really love our
too.
winding road
I know,
conversations.
it's lovely. Is there anything you've been working on that you're excited about?
I am. I started a new quilt. And I'm realizing all I've been thinking about is this particular quilt block. I think it's called a sawtooth. It's like a four-sided star. So it's like squares and triangles make up this block. But I've seen some that have like steeper angles on the teeth part. And I think I love quilting so much because I like seeing it and then trying to figure out how to cut the pieces appropriately and sew them back together to make this shape. I don't often use patterns. I kind of just ad lib. And that part is so fun to me. Like I was listening to a webinar today and I was just like doodling because I comprehend information well when I'm sort of
When your
doing
hands are
something else
busy,
with my
yeah.
hands. Yeah.
Brain open, hands busy.
Exactly. And so I was doodling and trying to figure out like, okay, I don't want the teeth to be at a 45. I want them to be more at like a 60. How can I make that happen while not wasting fabric and like cutting a rectangle into the proper shape? And I think I figured it out. And that's what I'm going to go do after this is like, go try that.
That's exciting when you have like I think I figured it out breakthrough and now you're going to go test it out.
Yeah. So that part, I mean, I was talking about quilting last night with one of my friends. Like I often don't finish the quilts. I really enjoy the piecing together and then the noodling part of it. And it's okay.
Yeah, you showed me like some of the pieces you've made. And I think I asked you, I was like, I want to buy one of these just as like a wall hanging for a friend. Because one of them really looks like my friend Zapung's like aesthetic.
Yeah. I will finish that one and you can do that. Yes. Thank you for that reminder because I forgot.
Yeah.
Anyway, how about you? What are you excited about?
I'm staring at it right now. There's a half paper mache giant strawberry in the corner of the studio.
For everyone, because you can't see it, even if you're watching the video, it looks like a dinosaur egg. It's like if Lauren paper mache around
and Rachael's
me,
gonna bust out of it.
and I am like crinkled up. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll snap a photo and put it in the video on YouTube, which you can watch if you're listening via audio. If you're watching,
done.
Great. Ooh.
What's your timeline?
This is good incentive to get it done by the time this episode
There
comes
you go.
out. I think I can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll be home for most of the month.
Yeah. You literally leave tomorrow.
I was going to say, the reason I'm excited about it is because I like set up the project to work on months ago and I just never did. I was like, I'm going to have it ready for our photo shoot for season 2. Didn't happen. But the reason I'm excited about it is because I think all the chaos people will resonate with this. Okay, here I go.
It's filled with mayo.
It's actually filled with mayo bottles that I washed.
Did you save your trash? Oh.
It is. So the armature is made out of the paper printouts that I used to transfer all the artwork for my mural workshops all summer. So I couldn't throw that away. And I'm so happy I was able to repurpose that. The paper pulp, I have a link on my blog to a recipe for this paper clay, if anyone is curious, that we'll put in the show notes. It does take forever to dry, but just put a fan on it. It'll dry a lot faster. This dried in 24 hours. I was storing paper pulp in my freezer for a year and a half, thinking like, I'm going to use this paper pulp because it's wet. So I was like, either I have to dehydrate it or freeze it. So I chose to freeze it, but it was taking up so much space in the freezer. And now I want that for food projects. I do have some dehydrated paper pulp underneath this workbach we were sitting on too.
You're the queen of
able to use all of that frozen paper pulp.
Yes.
And now the studio freezer is empty.
Yes.
And I have a dinosaur egg.
And you have a dinosaur egg, which I'm excited about. That rules.
Thank you.
Sustainability queen.
I know. And it's just, I'm turning into my grandma. Like I'm hoarding junk that could be art supplies in the future. And I'm trying to do that thing where I finally use it. So similar to what you were saying, just like the satisfaction of like, I think I got it.
Yeah.
And then like running with it. So
I think also the mental load of knowing that you have the paper pulp that you need to use.
Every time I open the freezer.
Yeah. Like I feel like those types of things take up space in our brain.
They
And to
do.
be able to like use it or clean it out or throw it away, even if you're not also a sustainability queen making a dinosaur egg strawberry, like even if you clean it out and like ditch some of the art supplies, give it to an arts and scraps type store.
Yeah.
Having that like physical space cleared, I think is beneficial for like making space for more creativity, like you said, for more food projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even what you said in episode 1 of this season of just making more space in your calendar, like having downtime and some space to dream, explore, whatever it may be, breathe.
Mm-hmm.
It is similar to your physical space. Like clutter, as a chaotic creative, I'm used to a little bit of chaos and clutter, but too much of it, especially day in, day out, walking by that thing you pulled off the side of the road in your garage,
Mm-hmm.
it is a little demoralizing.
Yeah.
Because you're reminded of the thing you said you were going to do that you had so much energy to do that
Mhm.
is just not getting done. So I'm proud of you for jumping on your quill. I'm proud of
Thanks.
me for clearing out my freezer.
I'm also proud.
Thank you.
I think we can probably end there.
That sounds lovely.
Great. Happy New Year,
Happy
Chaotic
New Year. We
Creatives.
hope your 2025 is off to a great start. Thank you for spending the first week of it with us.
Yeah. Yeah, we're thrilled to be doing this with
know.
you. Bye.